Hello, my name is Harrison Enlow, and my topic is on the effects of pets on child and adolescent SEL. So before I get started, I think a definition is due for SEL. This is short for social emotional learning, and a good definition that I found from that was from the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, and they defined it as a strength-based development process that begins at birth and further develops throughout the lifespan, and it is a process through which children, adolescents, and adults learn healthy skills that support their development and relationships, and it includes things such as self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsibility with decision-making. So previous research, to put this in context, previous research that has been conducted proves that pets are proven to aid in overall development of children and adolescents. In a study conducted by Lynn Piper and Clarissa Utley from the National Library of Medicine, it was found that they had some limitations, but overall they did see many positive effects. And in additional research, also from the National Library of Medicine, but by Rebecca Purewald, concluded that pets did have many positive benefits on a child's emotional, behavioral, educational, and social development. So the issue at hand was COVID-19. Whenever this came in March of 2020 to about August of 2020, roughly, children and adolescents were forced into a quarantine, and this showed many negative impacts on their development and their educational development. And so here are some of those examples. This is of the educational development. This was a study conducted by Megan Cuffeld from Brookings Institution, and this is essentially, they conducted a survey on influences on test scores. And so the dark blue is the COVID-19 quarantine. So this is math from elementary school and middle school, and that is English and reading scores from elementary school and middle school. And as you can see, a very large portion in all of these was COVID-19. So it had a very large impact overall on test scores. And this brings me to additional parts of development was the SEL. This was brought to me by my expert advisor, who is our psychology teacher at our school. I went to her with just the idea about the development of pets, and she allowed me to limit it down to just social emotional learning. And so this is where this comes in. I decided to just limit it down to that decrease that happened due to COVID-19 quarantine. So the gap that I found throughout my studies was that there was little to no research on if having a pet supported the development throughout COVID-19. All of the research that I found was prior to that. It was like 2019, around there, and I had no resources on pets on SEL specifically. So that is the gap of the research that we found. And so this brings forth my question: what are the effects of pets on child and adolescent SEL during and after the COVID-19 quarantine? So my initial hypothesis, I believed that owning a pet would have positive benefits, especially towards younger age groups. I believe that children would be greater impacted and during this developmental stage. So this brings me to my research process. I conducted a survey that questioned people from ages 5 to 18. It asked a couple background questions, one of those being if they had a pet or not, because that was one of my main goals. And following those, it was a series of SEL questions, and I edited those questions. I had the assistance of an elementary school teacher because I knew I had to get some of those younger audiences, and so I had to edit the responses so that it would be easier to understand. And those SEL questions were answered on a scale from 1 to 5 so that I could separate the two groups into those with pets and those without pets, and then gather a mean or average of the results and then compare it. So the goals, the main one was to determine if there's a difference in SEL scores if a student has or had a pet during this time period and after. And additional goals that I wanted to achieve if different types of pets had different impacts, and if different age groups were impacted more. So the questions, as I mentioned previously, it started off with the background questions, and this allowed me to separate into the two groups, and then it moved to the SEL questions, and they were answered on a scale from 1 to 5, where 1 is not at all like me, and 5 is extremely like me. This allowed my respondents to connect with the question and answer it as truthfully as possible. So this was the age of my responses. I tried to get 5 through 18, that was the goal. I had a couple over 18, and I did miss. I wasn't able to secure as many from the 5 to 9 range, but other than that, I had a pretty well-diverse group. So in hopes to reduce the possible other influences on my responses, there's some things that could possibly be going on in their life that could have influenced their responses to these SEL questions. So these are a couple of the questions I asked that blend in with the survey, but also help me get a little bit of their background without asking too much, to try and determine if they answered these in a certain way, why. It'll allow me to determine if they have traits, negative or positive, if one of these happened to have any effect on that. So how long did you have your pet? If they had it for a week, that probably didn't affect them too much compared to those with longer, their whole life or such things like that. And how often were you able to see face to face during the quarantine? And I have a friend at school, so the way they answered those allowed me to further look through my results and analyze. So here are the results. So the following are the questions that resulted in a positive average for those with pets compared to those without. And I did that by gathering the mean, like I said, and comparing. So the first one was I care about other people's feelings. So the mean for those without pets was a 3.714, while the mean for those with pets was 4.277. This just kind of demonstrates how those with pets, on average, tend to care about other people's feelings a little bit more compared to those without. The next was I can easily pull myself out of a bad mood. While both of these were fairly low, in my opinion, the mean for those without pets was lower at a 2.571, while those with pets was a 2.914. Like I said, both are kind of low, but those with pets tend to be able to pull themselves out of a bad mood and easier, and they can achieve that better. I try hard in school and think it will help me in the future. So in this one, the mean for those without pets was a 4.286, while the mean for those with pets was like 4.532. This further shows that those with pets are able to prioritize things properly and they can create positive relationships and determine the important things such as school compared to those without pets on average. And then I can calmly disagree with others and express my opinion without starting an argument. This was the greatest difference that I saw out of all of the responses, with almost being a 1-point differential. So the mean for those without pets was a 2.571, which is very low, and the mean for those with pets was 3.553. So on average, those with pets tend to be able to, seem more mature and are able to calmly disagree without starting an argument. Next question. So I worry about things almost every day. So remember, my questions were on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is not at all like me and 5 is extremely like me. So on a question like this, the lower number is what you'd want. So for those without pets, it was quite high at 4.286, which means the majority of them felt that they worry about things every day, while those with pets tend to worry a little bit less, still a good bit, but much less than those without pets. And then again, I feel sad more often than I feel happy. So just like this time, you wanted, just like the last question, the lower the better in this scenario. Luckily, these results were a little less than the last question, but the mean for those without pets was at 3.286, and the mean for those with pets was 2.894. So on average, those with pets are able to feel happy, more happy compared to those without pets. So not all of my questions that I asked resulted in a positive change, or none of mine had a positive change difference for those without pets, but many of my questions resulted in those where the mean was nearly identical or within like a 10th of a percentile. So I just decided they were important, but they didn't show a difference. But the majority of my questions, as y'all saw, did show a difference. So the limitations, the biggest limitation that I had was my number of responses. If I had a larger number of responses, I would have been able to get more of the minority groups that I missed in my research. Nationally, the average, nationally, about 70% of children and adolescents have a pet, so that's already a big difference that I had to deal with at the beginning. And in my research, it was around 80% of the respondents said that they did have a pet, so I had much less to work with for those without pets. And if I just had more responses, I would have been able to do that. I also wasn't able to get those at the youngest age. I had a lot of 9-year-olds actually, but it was the 8 through 5 that I really missed. And I just wasn't able to get the elementary schools, or those grades at least. I could get some other of the elementary schools, but those. And then additionally, there could have been other influences that on the respondents to make them answer in a certain way that I just simply couldn't have predicted or asked for throughout the survey. So those are other possible limitations. So my conclusion, on average, people with pets did tend to see greater SEL development throughout and after the COVID-19 quarantine compared to those without pets.
Very interesting topic. I think it's something that we need to pay more attention to because we have so many emotional issues in our country, and I feel like I need a new dog now after your presentation. I know there wasn't much research that you could find on it, but how did you review the methods used by scholars in the field to inform your selection?
So there wasn't specifically on SEL. However, there were many on just the development. Like I said previously, there was some on the development of children, adolescents, the effects of pets on those, but it was just prior to COVID-19. And so I looked at what they did, and their process was majority just surveys through those 5 to 18 range that just asked questions about development. So I chose that, and then I decided to look through SEL questions and just implement those into my survey.
So you chose the SEL questions from a survey of different questions that were asked. You didn't make up the questions?
Oh, well, I edited them to where they were more understandable for the younger audiences.
Okay.
But I did not make them up myself.
Okay. Thank you.
Harrison, great job, by the way, great job. I thought the element of you getting support from the elementary teacher to edit the questions so the 5 to 9 year olds could read them and understand and comprehend and give an accurate answer, I thought that was very wise of you. I thought that was a great move. My question for you, Harrison, and I also thought it was quite interesting that you wanted to see what other your future work, what other pets may have. Is there a particular pet that may have a greater influence on the SEL? So that was also very interesting to me. My question is, how do your findings provide direction for future research in the field?
So for future research, they can determine that there is, on average, more benefits for pets. So it's kind of two ways that they could take it. If they wanted to just focus on influences on SEL in general throughout COVID-19, they could do that. So more into the person's personal life and look at other factors other than pets. And then additionally, with pets specifically, they could have gone where I did not, where you just said. So different pets and subjects like that.
Thank you, Harrison.
Harrison, great presentation. Social emotional well-being, overall well-being is something that we certainly as educators, we discuss often. It's very important to us, and it has been greatly impacted for sure by the pandemic. My question for you is, thinking back to the initial curiosity that sparked your initial inquiry, what other curiosities do you have, and how has this process prepared you to explore them?
So I have a couple curiosities at the moment, but so I wanted to look more into the previous question. I'd like to look more into the effects of different influences throughout a child's life on their SEL, and I would probably use a similar survey. I'd use a survey again like this one, and I would try and research similarly. Another curiosity is on procrastination. That was my runner-up, and I was going to look into procrastination in high school students because it's very prominent, and it's not positive, but most people do it. So I just wanted to look into that, and I would probably use a survey through high school students to ask them questions about why they're procrastinating and the effects of procrastination on them.
Interesting.
I found this very interesting because I'm a big pet person and my dogs are like my babies, and I feel like they help even as an adult my social and emotional well-being. So I'm just curious, why did you choose this topic?
So I also enjoy pets, but personally I do not have a pet. My
Okay.
mother will not let me have one.
Okay.
But I've had one in the past and I loved her. And I just tend to notice that people with pets, they really enjoy being around their pets, and I just I wanted to know more about the effects that pets had on development.
Very good.